burdens that the region had shouldered from the first era of mass enslavement, in the gold and silver mines in the 16th century, and the second, that arrived in chains from Africa to toil in the plantations of the first commodity crops, sugar, bananas, coffee, for the new global market. Brazil's former president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, or as he is affectionately known, Lula, was justifiably proud of lifting 42 million previously excluded Brazilians into what he called the new middle class. Achieving and maintaining the support of Latin American workers like Bruno required constant improvements in the population's material well-being, and the fastest way to achieve this without triggering an external debt crisis was through exports of raw materials, minerals, monoculture cash crops like soy and meat, and the foreign exchange that these would generate. In a time of diminishing resources and the rise of China as a superpower, raw materials were valued as never before, and the temptation to rev up the extraction machine was difficult to resist. A race for ever more scarce resources in a quasi-Cold War between China and the United States made the model even more seductive. But how could the strategy prosper without committing the same atrocities as in the classic epochs of the plunder of Latin America, captured so vividly in Galeano's great book? Environmental destruction and accelerating deforestation in the Amazon, after all, was not only hastening planetary climate change and bringing catastrophic droughts to the Andes and Central America, it had also raised the risk of killer pandemics, as the slaughterhouses and feeding lots of the new Latin American meatpacking industry became the biggest in the world, and the pathogens of wildest nature were released into the slums of jungle metropolises. Burgeoning Amazon towns like Itaituba, with poor sanitation and chaotic urbanization, had already become breeding grounds for Zika, the mosquito-borne virus that threatened to spread throughout Brazil, terrifying athletes due to perform at the 2016 Rio Olympics. Then there were the political problems generated by the model. If Bruno was typical of this new aspirational middle class, with aspirations to consume more, perhaps even more jet skis, how could it uphold the principles of equality and environmental protection that progressive governments from Brazil to Ecuador had championed? The problem would soon be confirmed by the defeat of the Workers' Party in Brazil, and its replacement by a ruthless extreme right-wing government under Jair Bolsonaro that was closely allied to mining and agribusiness. The new middle class had destroyed its creator, a fate shared a year later by Evo Morales in Bolivia, though Morales' movement toward socialism staged an impressive comeback. As the rivalry for access to natural resources between China and the United States intensified, Latin American progressive governments also became vulnerable to Washington-led regime change policies, threatening a return to the years when Galeano wrote his masterpiece, and most of the continent was governed by brutal pro-U.S. military regimes. In this book, a collection of chronicles based on a range of raw materials extracted in Latin America, from soy to niobium, beef to gold, and oil to avocado, I try to reflect on this dilemma as well as analyze the dramatic events. Coups d'état soft or hard in Honduras, Bolivia, and Brazil. Extraordinary popular uprisings in Santiago de Chile, Quito, and Bogotá, and the likelihood of more social unrest after the devastation caused by COVID-19 that have shaken the region in recent years. Some of Galeano's destinations are revisited, icons of colonial plunder and pillage such as Potosí, Minas Gerais, and Zacatecas, where I have tried to update his bold thesis. Based on the dependency theories of Immanuel Wallerstein, Celso Furtado, and André Gunder Frank, that in a world of powerful centers and subjugated outposts, we Latin Americans are poor because the ground we tread is rich. Open Veins of Latin America, written when Galeano was only 28 years old, was the Bible of a generation of the left that came to power in Latin America at the beginning of the new century. From Lula to Evo Morales, Rafael Correa to Hugo Chavez. Chavez even gave a copy of the book to a skeptical Barack Obama. But of the two main messages in Galeano's argument, the need to break the ties of dependence with the ex-colonial powers and their multinational corporations, while steering the economy away from dependency on the export of raw materials, only the first has been heeded. The dependence of the export of commodities remained in many countries, and when inevitably the supercycle of high international prices of minerals, oil, and basic foodstuffs ended in a second wave of the great financial crisis, the failure would prove costly for a leftist project that appeared to have found the magic formula to redistribute income, and at the same time stay in government.